today I'll talk about different CSS approach. And I think this is the only talk about CSS in Vue today, which is cool. I don't have anyone to compare with. Yes. But before that, I want to go to ask you a question. Who is here were born in 1991? That's little. Cool. 1995. 2002? No? Only one? Oh, okay. How about 2005? No. Okay, cool. So anyone that was born in 1991, 1995, and 2002, you should be proud because you were born in the year that is more important for our web development. Because in 1991, the first public description of HTML were introduced with the first initial 18 tags that allow you to build a basic HTML page. And of course, CSS and JavaScript are nowhere to be seen. 1995, JavaScript is born as Mocha. The first name is Mocha, and then later they changed it to LiveScript when they ship it in Netscape Navigator 2.0. And HTML 1.0 was already integrated in Navigator, and HTML 2.0 already on the way. And CSS was an RFC on the table, ready to be implemented. 2002 is actually a very interesting year. A lot of people here know why, but it's not there. 2002, CSS was first fully integrated in which browser? Do we have any things to give away? Because seems like everyone was tired to answer. So which browser that was fully integrated with CSS, fully supports CSS 1.0? There's no Firefox. No one? Seriously? Yes, Internet Explorer. Which computer? No. I don't have any GoPro, sorry. So, okay, again, which browser? Which computer? What? No, which operation system, sorry. No. No, it's a Macintosh. It's the Internet Explorer for Macintosh. And not Netscape Navigator, it's still not fully supported. And JavaScript was firstly under ECMA standard and become a full front-end language for development. And 2005 is the major thing with Ajax that allow us to do dynamic loading data in the background without fully reload the page. And then we have jQuery. Who here loves jQuery? Raise your hands. That's a lot, yay! Who here is still using jQuery in production? That's another one, yes! Okay, and CSS gaining fame. And since then, we have a lot of framework, a lot of tools, and a lot of technology were born to support web development to be more and better and faster and more optimized, like Angular 1, well, at that point that was introduced were good. And then React, and then ES6, HTML, CSS3, and of course, 2014, we have Vue.js. Who born? Cool. Clap! No. So also Angular and HTML5. And that's, from that moment, we come from this kind of website. It's the Viola www. It's not a HTML. It's the first version of HTML with a little bit of something like style sheet. To this website, Space Jam. If you go to conference, you probably see this at every talk. It's like every talk they will put this one at the showcase of 1995 design. It's still working. And it's pixelated, but it's still working. And 2019, how beautiful. Everything here is picture, but we're using CSS fully In CSS, there's no play around with image, there's no play around with other HTML tag. We actually have proper CSS, and it was beautiful, it was more usable, more friendly to user, and it's faster also. But meanwhile, CSS is getting better, but still, it's not that better. Because another question, anyone here likes CSS? Okay, not too bad. Are you lying? So the rest of you didn't like it. I get it. So yeah, sometimes you have the fear. So CSS is cool. It's awesome because it helps you to make beautiful stuff. But sometimes, for example, in this case, I have 3 Chris. 3 handsome guys. Actually, on the Chris guy is kind of handsome. Call me than that. And all of them are different completely. The only thing is similar is that they have the same name, Chris. And each of them have a different background. I zoom in. What if I have a button with the class Chris? What is the color it will be? Is it going to be yellow, or blue, or green? Well, it depends. Depends on which order you place the class, depends on which CSS load the last. Depends on a lot of stuff. And it's really hard because the order of CSS rule, the ruling, the way they determine the order of the selector is really tricky. And that's why we come up with this. So now you have important. But then, which one is important? The blue one, the gold one, or the green one? I'm also feel important. Can I have important myself also? And this is where we get bad. By the way, a lot of library I saw, we have a lot of important, and this makes me feel like I'm unimportant because I don't know what to do. And that's why we have problem with CSS. Global namespace, implicit dependencies, and we have a lot of dead code somewhere because the more you code, the complex you code, the more dead code you probably have somewhere because developers are afraid to remove the old CSS code. You can remove a class name and it works fine, but you don't want to remove a block of styling because you don't know where in the code base it will break. And that's when we have dead code. Or, of course, non-deterministic order of source, like we saw. We don't know which page will load last, and then what the styling can affect the current view. And minification, a huge fight. Everyone knows that. Let me say that yesterday. We have a huge CSS file, and it's bad. So in order to solve this, we come up with a lot of technologies, a lot of approaches to try to set standard and try to solve it. All of those are not really old. It's still ongoing. It's still working. For example, object-oriented CSS, SMA CSS, which stands for scalable, modular, and architecture CSS. These two normally go together because it's trying to set CSS standard according to object-oriented standard design, and it's also trying to categorize your CSS into different categories, and that applies to a lot of libraries nowadays. I believe also Technion follow this stuff, and maybe Tailwind, but I'm not so sure, so don't quote me on that. BEM is also another one that's very, very popular. It stands for block, element, and modifier. You name the class according to that, so you know exactly which block, which element, and what status of the element. So you can change it, and it make it readable and more organized. CSS processors like SCSS, nothing new. CSS frameworks like component frameworks, Vuetify, Storefront UI, or Tailwind CSS, or Technion, or Bootstrap. Bootstrap is the most common everyone using, right? So, but the problem with this, all the class name is still global. You cannot get away with it. It's hard to migrate. Think about if you're using component library, for example, like Beautify or something, and if you want to migrate to a different component library, you technically have to go over your code trying to change the syntax of the component to the new one, because each of the component will go according to the certain syntax. So it's very hard to migrate. Or SCSS have its own standard, so it's not that easy. Naming. Anyone here have the problem with naming your CSS selector? Yeah, me too. And it's not all of them are pure CSS. SCSS is not CSS. And of course, not scalable because of the CSS file. And hard to customize. If you put important there, how will you customize it? So, what about real-time modifier? Well, we have good news is that we have CSS variable, which is easy to use, and it's awesome. But the bad news is that Internet Explorer doesn't like it. It doesn't want to have it. I also don't know when it wants to have it. So if you don't care about Internet Explorer, you're good with it. But if you have to support clients that still using Internet Explorer 11, like me, then you will find it, then you have to write a polyfill, or you have to use JavaScript to intercept the DOM styling, and that causes performance issue and complexity. Because every time you can cause repaint and reflow of the page, right? It's not that hard. I mean, it's really performance issue here. So we have different approach try to solve this. One of we have other alternative, luckily in Vue. One of these is scope CSS. It's a built-in thing. And what is we're doing in scope CSS? It's simple. We have the component. Let's say I have a Pokemon item that displays the image of the Pokemon and the title. And all I need to do in order to make a scope is that to put a scope in the script tag, and it will be scope. And then put a title with a color, and then it will just apply to it. So if I have another title on somewhere in the parent outside of the component, then I add the title with a different color, it would not apply to the children because the style of the children only applies to the children. It doesn't apply backwards to the parent. Similar to the parent, it doesn't apply to the child. But if I be more specific, in this case, what will happen? The child title will change according to the parents because it's a shallow scope. It's not the tight scope. And on the parent styling actually leak into the child component. And then when you have more specific, according to CSS rule, everything broke. No more encapsulation, and that's it. Someone can actually accidentally override this somewhere in your code without you knowing it. So the good thing is that you have on the full CSS, preprocessor support, it's easy to do it, reusable, of course it's style. And it generates the random class, like it's go with the class name and the data v using the attribute and some random number. Everything works very well. And it's scope because you have the attribute is generated randomly, so the selector is also very scope. But it's, like I say, it's shallow scope. So if you have something like app.app.title, it becomes more specific than title with the attribute inside. CSS rule, win again. And that's a bad thing, because then you cannot skip the scope anymore. So in order to solve this one, and also it doesn't, scope CSS does show other things that we wanted to show. In 2015, Christopher, a Facebook engineer, actually reasoned that some of the CSS problem can be solved if it were written in JavaScript, and that becomes CSS in JS. Anyone here using CSS in JS library? Or heard about it? Okay, that's not, okay, cool, because then you're here to hear about it. So the ideal concept of CSS in JS is that we have scope, we have extendable, still together, but on condition. Full CSS support, it helps to support server-side rendering, debuggable, syntax highlighting, free of dead code, and main important, theme. It helps to allow theming easily. The first one is CSS Module. It's the very first CSS and JS library. And when it first introduced in React, and then we adapted into Vue, and now it's a built-in in Vue. If you create application with Vue Loader, you already have it built in. So how do we do it? For example, now I change from using normal class, I will become using as a variable. And I change from using scope, I just change, instead of writing scope, I will write in module, and I can extract it into different module to keep the CSS scope into module. Like in here, which module, I have 2 modules. And theming. This is the cool thing about theming with CSS in CSS module. I have a module called theme, and all I need to do is I'm using CSS variable, export the CSS variable to the CSS object, import it to JavaScript code, and use it. And I have access to all this CSS variable inside JavaScript code. And then inside the JavaScript code, I'm using provide and inject pattern to allow the whole app to get the theme together. So I'm using provide, I add in some reactivity in here. And then in sorry. And in any component we're using the theme, I'll just inject it and just use it with like theme or default color or something, and that's it. But as you can see here, I need to write style.background equal background because I cannot write it back to the CSS file. So I need to actually either using inline style, or I need to write it with JavaScript intercept with the DOM styling, or I need to use CSS variable. We do have some kind of theme in here. So from this class, it will turn into a random generated class, but more readable according to what you want it to be. By default, it will be the source, the folder, and the folder of the component, and the component itself, the element itself. So we have on the scope CSS benefit plus theming, kind of, and dynamic modifier. But, like I say, it's not really CSS in JS. Why? Because it's no easy way for theming. You have to use theming with external help, like writing inline style, using CSS variable, or you have to write directly using JavaScript code. Because CSS still remains a read-only object to JavaScript code. Because we export it at the object. We don't have the reactivity between these two files. On runtime, whatever you write into this CSS object that imported from the CSS file is remain read-only. You cannot touch. It doesn't write back to the CSS on runtime, so it doesn't affect the CSS. It remains static. And that's another one is naming. You still need to name your element. You still need to name your properties. No one likes it. I mean, I don't like to thinking of how to name my element. It's hard. And that's when have CSS and JS. This is the real CSS and JS. Currently, we have only 2 CSS and JS library. The Vue support for style component and emotion. In this talk, I will only focus on style component. Let's say if I have a view with grid view and list view for Pokemon list, and to make it harder, I want it to be able to change some theme according to user input or according to a list of theme available on runtime. So how I do this with style component? First, I have an object, of course, define all the theme I'm using. And then I'm just using the provide, like I just showed you before, provide an inject pattern. And in the component that I'm using the theme, I will import the style from the view style component, create some props, and using style, create some styling by using string literal, like here, style item. Readable? Sorry. And in addition to this, I can use also YIQ, a library to calculate the contrast color for a given color. This to allow me to maintain the contrastivity of the title and the background. In addition, I'm using also Polish, which is the library that was written for a style component that allow you to calculate darken mode or lighten color for a specific color according to some variant. Here I'm using the variant of 0.05 to calculate it. And of course, I'm just exported a normal component to use in our component. And with inject, and this is how the template will look. That's it. And what's the output? Like here. And every time when you change, the color of the title will also change, the color of the background change, the color of hover also change according to the theme color was given on the input. You can also provide an input field that user can type in any color, and it still works on runtime. Is there any CSS styling block here? There's none, right? Nothing here. Everything was written in JavaScript. Well, you have CSS, of course, but in JavaScript code. So the good thing about this is that everything is scoped. Everything is generated randomly. You don't even see a class name here. I don't use any class name here. Everything was written using string literal and put CSS directly. Easy to theme, as you can see. No dead code, because you see what you did. If you saw something is not working, you get rid of it right away. You're not afraid of what happened for the other code. Runtime modifier, that's a winner. And extendable. Extend the component is very easy. You just need to write the component .extend and put the new CSS styling inside, and it will automatically update it. More of that, you can combine with CSS Module and style component together for the theme. Let's say I have the colors, but I don't want the colors to be in my main logic because I want to be more customizable or more flexible. So I would just use in CSS Module with export the CSS variable, and that's it. Nothing else. Same thing, almost same code. And this way, you can maintain the code at ease. And you don't have to worry about what if you change the theme, what if you want the theme to be configurable outside of the file, what if you want to use SCSS. You can combine two things together, and it still works, and it's still good. And the most important thing here, see the CSS file? So why is better than a small CSS file size when loading? What's better than that? Something for tailwind CSS. It actually no CSS at all. You don't have any CSS file. It doesn't generate it because you don't write any style in here. You don't need any style script here unless you're using CSS Module. But other than that, no, nothing. Good, right? Because no CSS means less loading time and it's better performance. Or is it? So here's the bad thing. I know. So here the not the bad thing, but not so good. The first one is that unfortunately, style component for Vue is not supported in Nuxt, not yet. And only Emotion was supported in Nuxt. But I'm not sure that it's fully scaled, fully supported or partially supported. So for server-side rendering, if you're using Nuxt, Too bad, you can only use emotion. The second one is that instead of loading the CSS file separately with the JavaScript file, now you have two combined to one. So the browser needs to download the JavaScript file, load it, and then parse the CSS part outside of the JavaScript, and then inject it to the style sheet of the document, of the page. And only then, HTML will start the first bend. This process repeated every time you refresh the page. There's no catching. Instead, in CSS, if you have a CSS file, and most of the browser will catch it. So the first time you load, it will take a little bit of time, but then the second time, it will already take it from the cache faster and faster, and it's separate from the JavaScript file. So even if you have some website that doesn't run JavaScript, some browser doesn't allow you to run JavaScript, or what if something happened with the browser that is so slow that it takes time to load and parse the JavaScript part, then it's broken. Your UI will be broken, and then you don't have accessibility for user anymore. They will see a broken page instead of the nicely looking page, but not functional. Which one you prefer? And last one is, not last, almost last. So let's zoom in. I have a box. And the size of the box change according to the input from user. What if I type in the input from 1 to 200? How many class it will generate for each input? If I have from 1 to 200, from 1 to 1,000 input differently, how many class? Well, it's 1,000 input, 1,000 class generated. And it's not deleted unless you do refresh. Because it cannot know which one you are using, which one you're not using. It needs to catch on. So the next time when you enter the same input, it will not try to create a new class. It's polluted. Because 1,000 class is unused and it's there in the style sheet. Do you really want to use it? I don't know. I don't like it. But maybe someone will like it. Or someone will care. And security. So in style sheet, they write that you need to sanitize. Because if you're using a third-party library, and the library is using style component, then you cannot control what they put inside the CSS style. And you can be attacked by any hacker there. But if you can control, if you know that you're not using any third party, that you're using style component, then you're good. But this is something to consider because it's a security issue. And the last one, this is funny, sorry. Because CSA Inches actually means it's still CSS. And you still need to learn it. No, actually, I got someone message me the other day saying that, oh, great, this is so good. I tried with style component today, and I write the entire component without a single CSS code. And I was like, so what are you writing in that string? Like background color or something? Is it not CSS? I didn't know that. So yeah, you still need to learn CSS, yeah? So the question now is, should we use CSA in JS? Of course we can. Why not? It's cool. It's good. It's less things to worry about. But we're cautious because there's the bad, the good, and the ugly. Some scope is working. Yeah. There's scope that are easy to theme, but they have security issue. They style on runtime. So you need to take all of this into consideration if you have a large JavaScript code base. And it's also messy code because you're technically messing between JavaScript and CSS. So think about it. In the other hand, CSS also have good and bad and ugly. More like bad, more than good. But like tailwind CSS is cool. So my advice is that using the right tool for the right job. And naming is definitely not a good reason. I know, I want to use it for my decision making, but no one likes it. It's not a good enough reason, but it's one of the reasons. So when to use it? Basically, if you have a component that is isolated, it's for large app. Like if you have a very complex enterprise app, very big code base, and you want to make sure that each and every component are isolated, and so that developer can work on a component without making huge effect in other component, then you should use CSA Inches. And then team, if you want to have team and you need to support IE, then sure. Because it gives you a lot of control over the component styling, over the component. In the other hand, CSS just the rest of it. If you don't care, whatever, if you write a third-party library, like component library, do it. Because overwriting CSS in JS styling is nightmare. You cannot override it because it's random generated. So you don't know which one is the correct class name to actually use it. So if you write in a library for people, other people to use, that to customize, never use CSS in JS. It's not working. Or you can use in the middle. So, or the last thing is that if you want to make life easier, just to make it easier for you guys, use utility first framework. I did this one especially for Debbie. She keep asking me about tailwinds. So yeah, you can use Technion CSS, which we use in production now in my work. And it's worked very, very good. It gives you all the basic CSS to go with, and you don't need extra than that. Or Tailwinds CSS, which is the hot topic of our conference. And from Tailwind, you can extract the static CSS file for Technion. So you can actually, from Tailwind, you can get the Technion CSS file from the configuration. So it's cool. Or you can use Tailwind with style component by using Tailwind macro. You can write Tailwind's config, define the theme that you want, and then you can use it to make it into style component with the Tailwind, with the styling you have. So this way you separate two things. You can still use Tailwind for the theming, for defining the theming globally, but you can use the style component to take advantage of what Tailwind gives you, and you don't have to write extra class for it. Other resource, yeah. And that's it.